uh, now we can move into querying this data. And I'll read this paragraph right here and feel free to follow along. So oftentimes you don't want all the data, but rather you just want to work with a subset of entities matching specific criteria. Rather than retrieving all data and writing your own parser, it is far more efficient to narrow your data to the subset before retrieving it. For this, DataJoint offers a very powerful yet intuitive syntax language that lets you select exactly the data you want before you get it. So I really want to emphasize this point that DataJoint allows you to query, and a query is searching for data in a database. So I think of it like looking through a window, right? And let's say if you're at like a bakery and you only want to look at the bagels, you can tell your mind, hey, just look for the bagels, right? And you focus in on all the bagels. Or if you just want to look at the cupcakes, you focus in on all the cupcakes. So that's kind of what a query is. It is also critical to note that the result of any DataJoint query represents a valid entity. So now we'll introduce three major types of queries used in DataJoint: the restriction and negative restriction, and these are used to filter data. The join, which brings fields from different tables together, and the projection, or the .proj, which focuses on a subset of attributes. So these are all very powerful tools in DataJoint. And so let's get started with the restriction. So the restriction operator uses an ampersand and lets you specify the criteria to narrow down the search. So we'll look at our mouse table again, and we can see that we have so much fun populating it, but maybe we don't want all the mice, right? Maybe we just want to know information on mouse 0. So to do that, you'll tell DataJoint, hey, I want data from the mouse table, and using your ampersand, I want the mouse ID for that mouse to be 0. You can see here the syntax. The criteria right here, you put it in quotation marks. And so as you run it, yes. So DataJoint tells us, all right, here you go. You asked nicely and correctly. So here's your data. So we get mouse ID 0, and we get all the information inside the mouse table regarding this mouse. So we get its date of birth and sex. So maybe we want all the mice that are male inside the mouse table. So we say, hey, DataJoint, inside the mouse table, look inside the mouse table and return all mice that are male. There we go. So we have 3, and just to verify, 1, 2, 3, right? Okay. And finally, and next, if we want to get all the mice that are female, we do the same thing. So we have our female mice. And you can also query using a dictionary like this. You say, hey, DataJoint, look inside the mouse table and give me a mouse with the ID of 0. And the dict just tells it the format, right? And so yes, so we get mouse with an ID of 0. We can also use inequalities inside our queries. And these inequalities help you to match based on desired values. Let's say, for example, if I was curious about all the mice born after the 15th of June, I would say, hey, DataJoint, look inside the mouse table, and all the mice with the date of birth greater than 2021 6/15, let me see those mice. And a point to note here is you have these single quotation marks for the, and then when you're specifying the entry that would be in the field, you have those in like double quotation marks. So DataJoint gives us all the mice born after June 15th. So you can also look for mice born within a range of dates. So it's not only after or before a certain date or before after a certain criteria. You can look within a certain range using keywords between and. So we have our query right here. So DataJoint, look inside the mouse table, and give me all the mice that were born between the 1st of May and the 1st of June. And we see that it returns it. So yes, May 21st, May 23rd, and 1st of June. Yes, excellent. And you can also use the not equal. So, or the not, yeah. So this is the not equal to for all our Pythonistas, we know that. So, so we're looking for all the mice that are not male. So this is the equivalent of looking for all mice that are female, right? And you can easily combine multiple restrictions to narrow down entities based on multiple attributes. So let's find all mice that are not male and are born after 2021, after May 1st, 2021. And I want to emphasize how intuitive the querying language is. It's neat. It's extremely simple. You can see here that the usage of commands are minimal, but it does a great job at finding all our data. So we're looking for mice that are not male. So you'd say, look inside the mouse table, look for mice that are not male, and make sure, give me mice that are born after this date. And so it reads, it's very intuitive, the language. I love it. And so it says the result of one query can be used in another query. So this is another really powerful aspect of DataJoint. And it goes back. And so we can assign this query to a variable. So we could say DataJoint, look inside mouse table and return all the mice that are female, and we'll assign it to this female variable. All right. And then you can use, let me see. Oh. And then we can use the female mice and restrict it with a mouse ID of 10. So sorry, there should be female mice with a mouse ID that is greater than 10. Sorry. So we can see that all the female mice that were returned, their IDs were greater than 10. So we have 12, 18, and 22. Excellent. So our AND or our ampersand restrictor is extremely powerful. You can even use one table to restrict another table. So let's look at what that means, or let's look at what that's like. So you can say mouse. So you can say, hey, DataJoint, give me all the mice that have values or that are inside the session table. In other words, give me all the mice that have had a session, right? So we're restricting by session. And so we can see that we get the columns that are from the mouse table, right? The mouse ID, date of birth, and sex. And we're restricting it to all the mice who have had a session. So we have four different mice who have had a session. And just to check, we see that, yes, those are the four mice who have had a session. Excellent. Before we move on, do we have any questions on these restrictions? All right, awesome. So, and we can, the beauty of DataJoint is that you can grow these restrictions, right? You can continue combining the queries. So let's say we wanted to look for all the male mice who have had a session. So again, we want all the data on these male mice, right? So hey, DataJoint, look into the mouse table. And if they've had a session, return them. But also, if these mice are male, return them. So you can see that we're restricting by these additional values here. And so we see that two male mice have had a session, mouse 1 and mouse 34. And we can continue looking, and it says, and so what if we wanted to look at all the mice that had a session before the 20th of June? So we do the same thing, and we say, give us all the, we look into the mouse table, and give us a session, or give us the mice that have had a session with a session date before or equal to June 20th. And so we see that we've had two mice that have had a session before June 20th. Yes, if we look at, yes. And so now we're going to look at the negative restriction. And so this one works in the opposite way, right? So if we wanted to look at all the mice that didn't have a session, and we wanted the data from this table, we'd say mouse minus session. So these are all the mice that do not have a session. Okay. All right. So